All right, we've got a lot to dig into today. So, this was 2 days ago. It's kind of old news at this point, but whatever. I'm still going to cover it. I don't care. You can say what you want. So, this is Stephen Colbert, and it's about his late night show, The Late Show specifically, which he took over back in 2015 from David Letterman, who was one of my favorite late night show hosts of all time. He's basically explaining why the FCC censored his guest, or his guest that he was going to have on to be broadcast on regular TV, James Tallarico, who is becoming increasingly famous due to the fact that he is extremely outspoken and extremely intelligent, very well-spoken individual about the Trump administration and all the horrendous things they're doing right now. But before we get into it, I wanted to bring your attention to this just because I thought it was kind of interesting. I read this morning, and it just seems that more and more secrets are slowly but surely coming out of the Republican Party and just, conservatives in general. So this says Erica Kirk, who is the wife of the late Charlie Kirk, founder and former CEO of Turning Point USA, allegedly linked to sex trafficking network as her pastor faces child trafficking counts. The former pageant contestant Erica Kirk is embroiled in controversy over alleged ties to a sex trafficking network. It says Erica Kirk, contestant and activist, is facing renewed scrutiny following disturbing allegations that connect her to a sex trafficking network as her pastor faces multiple child trafficking charges. The revelations have sparked outrage online, with some whistleblowers claiming Kirk has been closely involved with individuals and organizations implicated in criminal activity over the years. Now, this isn't really proven, but I do kind of have this theory as to conservatives in the Republican Party and how they try to overcompensate sometimes. My belief is that in some cases, particularly conservatives, try to overcompensate, whether it be via religion, whether it be via Christianity in particular, to kind of hide some of their not so desirable or not so likable traits, and in this case, potentially pedophilia and potentially child sex trafficking. You also see this with other people like Nick Fuentes, who's a famous white nationalist, famous Christian nationalist, who kind of gained notoriety back in 2017 during the Virginia protests when that person drove a Dodge Challenger and killed somebody. And there was one time in particular where he was caught watching gay porn right after his live stream ended, or so he thought. Another example would be kind of recently, even more recent than that, which was at the RNC back in 2024, July 2024 in particular, I'm pretty sure. It was in my home state, Wisconsin, at the Pfizer Forum in Milwaukee, when the app or website, I can't remember which, Grindr, crashed due to the amount of people on its server who were highly concentrated near the Pfizer Forum and all the hotels, which would imply that there's a lot of gay closeted conservatives, which is kind of very interesting to me. So, and that's not to say that watching gay porn is bad or being gay is bad in general. I'm just saying that I think people, particularly in the Republican Party, who are conservative, tend to overcompensate for some of the things they either don't want to share or don't want to share because they know is bad, like child sex trafficking or pedophilia, and try to overcompensate it with things like Christianity, acting ultra-traditionalist, etc., etc. Now, before any thorough investigation, I'm not going to come out and say that Erica Kirk is a pedophile. I'm not going to say that she's a child sex trafficker. But one can reasonably assume that it is kind of interesting that she has these allegations put against her, given the fact that she's tied to some very powerful people who have had similar allegations, such as Donald Trump, whose name pops up in the Epstein files more than Jesus' name pops up in the Bible, over 1 million times. 1 million times in the Epstein files. That is crazy. That is absurd. That is unheard of. Either way, back to this, I just wanted to give you kind of that rundown real quick. But I love the way Stephen Colbert handles this, because he's basically telling everybody that, hey, you know what? The FCC told me that I wasn't allowed to have this person on, that I wasn't even supposed to tell you that he was going to be on. But here we are. And I mean, honest to God, Stephen Colbert doesn't even have anything to lose at this point. Obviously, his show is being taken off the air. I mean, CBS said for financial purposes, but Donald Trump basically took ownership for that last summer when he said, all right, yay, we got Stephen Colbert off the air. Well, he's going to be off of the air in May of 2026, but that's besides the point. He said next is Myers, next is Fallon, next is Kimmel. So clearly he wants to get these people off of the air because he knows they are a voice of opposition against him. Funny that he isn't targeting people on Fox News who spread lies all the time, but the moment that Jimmy Kimmel says maybe something slightly off color, rip him off the air, man. Let's pressure the FCC, pressure Brendan Carr to take him off the air indefinitely. And this is the other thing. Basically, Brendan Carr, chairman of the FCC, told Stephen Colbert that the reason he wasn't going to have James Tallarico on was due to this mandate way back in the 1950s, 1940s, 1950s, something like that, called the Equal Times Protection Act, something like that. Jimmy Kimmel talked about this on a show a couple weeks ago, which was basically put in place so that candidates, could get equal representation on TV when TV was the dominant form of media. Obviously, we are living in different times. TV is not the dominant form of media at this point. I would even venture to say that things like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at this point are even more so, especially among young audiences like Gen Zers. This Equal Protection Times Act or whatever hasn't even been used in many, many years at this point either by both Republican and Democratic presidents. So obviously, Brendan Carr and Donald Trump's decision to use this is a little bit sketchy. It's a little bit sus, and obviously, I think one can put together what he's trying to do. Donald Trump is scared of the midterms right now. Donald Trump is scared because his approval rating is so low. It's between 30 and 37%, somewhere near there. And he knows that the midterms, Democrats will likely cream them. So that is a threat. That is a threat to have anybody on the air talking against him, anybody in the oppositional side, anybody who has an oppositional voice against Donald Trump and his administration. That is a threat, which is why he's pressuring the FCC to take him off. It's not because some Equal Protections Clause or Equal Protections Act of the 1950s. It's not because they actually want adequate representation. That's why we have different channels. That's why we have Fox News. That's why we have Newsmax. That's why there are channel buttons on your remote. You can change it. If you don't like what Colbert has to say, hop over to Fox News. Watch Greg Gutfeld. If you don't like what CNN's saying, hop over to frickin' Newsmax. That is the true equal representation. Back then, we didn't have that because there were only three stations. There were really only three stations. There was NBC, ABC, and CBS. I think those were the main ones. But now, obviously, we are living in a day and age where you can get up to 1,000 channels on TV, not to mention just the access to the internet, access to things like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. All of that didn't exist back then, so obviously their decision to use it is primarily for targeting reasons. So I'll let you listen to a little bit more.
You know who is not one of my guests tonight? That's Texas State Representative James Tallarico. He was supposed to be here, but we were told in no uncertain terms by our network's lawyers, who called us directly, that we could not have him on the broadcast. Then I was told, in some uncertain terms, that not only could I not have him on, I could not mention me not having him on. And because my network clearly doesn't want us to talk about this, let's talk about this. You've probably heard. So, you might have heard of this thing called the equal time rule, okay? It's an old FCC rule that applies only to radio and broadcast television, not cable or streaming, that says if a show has a candidate on during an election, they have to have all that candidate's opponents on as well. It's the FCC's most time-honored rule right after no nipples at the Super Bowl. There's long been an exception for this rule, an exception for news interviews and talk show interviews with politicians. Now, that's crucial. How else were voters supposed to know back in '92 that Bill Clinton sucked at saxophone? But on January 21st of this year, a letter was released by FCC chairman and smug bowling pin Brendan Carr. In this letter, Carr said he was thinking about dropping the exception for talk shows because he said some of them were motivated by partisan purposes. Well, sir, you're chairman of the FCC, so FCCU. Because I think... Simple. Because I think you are motivated by partisan purposes yourself. Sir,
absolutely.
You smelt it because you dealt it. You are Dutch ovening America's airwaves. Let's just call this what it is. Donald Trump's administration wants to silence anyone who says anything bad about Trump on TV because all Trump does is watch TV. Okay? He's like a toddler with too much...
Absolutely, and it's kind of important to note, I just thought I'd mention this, that, you know, the Republican Party and conservatives as a whole are the party of no cancel culture, right? They're the party of, you know, we're not going to have any political suppression. We're not going to have any reductions of freedom of speech, even if it means doing things like using derogatory racial statements, right? Even things like that they wanted so badly to protect. But as soon as it comes to Stephen Colbert, obviously a more left-leaning late-night talk show host, having on a liberal guest, then no, then we have to have media suppression. Then we have to have checks and balances against this late night show host. Ironically, I don't think Stephen Colbert would be as mad if this was actually a rule in place for many, many years and actually enforced by other presidents other than Donald Trump. But in addition to that, I also think it's funny because Trump was the one who told all of us last January or February, something like that he was going to restore freedom of speech, that he was going to be the one to end all government censorship. Now, obviously, this would imply that he's doing everything but that, which is why it's so frustrating for people in particular like me, for people like Stephen Colbert, because obviously, this idea that they're doing it because of equal protection clauses or equal protection acts is bullshit. It's obviously just another form of media suppression, and it needs to be told like it is. So I want you to get this idea out of your head that Donald Trump's somehow trying to protect everybody on both parties. It's just not how it works. It's just not what he's trying to do at all. So I'll let Stephen Colbert continue, but thank you.
Much screen time. He gets cranky and then drops a load in his diapers. So it's no surprise that two of the people most affected by this threat are me and my friend Jimmy Kimmel. When this letter dropped, we both talked about the letter on air, and then later, Carr defended it like this.
If Kimmel or Colbert want to continue to do their programming and they don't want to have to comply with this requirement, then they can go to a cable channel or a podcast or a streaming service, and that's fine.
Great idea, man whose job is to regulate broadcast TV. Suggest everyone just leave broadcast TV. It's like when Arby's changed their slogan to, Arby's, would it kill you to eat a salad? Anyway, am I being clear?
Yeah, it's clear.
Have I been clear so far?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, this one up, super important. Okay, anyway, I decided to take Brendan Carr's advice. I am going to interview James Tallarico tonight, but it's not going to be on The Late Show. It's going to be on The Late Show's YouTube page. The network says I can't give you URL or a QR code, but I promise you, if you go to our YouTube page, you'll find it. Now, what, after the show, right? Little later. Okay.
Obviously, this is kind of an awesome move by Stephen Colbert, basically telling the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, basically telling everybody in the Trump administration to F off, right? Like, he's not going to bend his knee to them. He's not going to change or be silenced just because they're asking him to in unspoken ways. He's not going to put up with it. And what does he have to lose at this point? His show's going to be taken off the air in May, so he has nothing to lose. Whatever. We're going to have a good time. And if that's the way they want to play, that's the way we'll play, I guess. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm still trying to figure this out. Trying to establish a routine. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, comment down below. I am totally open to discussions, so tell me what you like. Tell me if I'm wrong. I'll take all of it. So I'm totally open to discussion. So if you'd like, comment down below. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. I don't care. Whatever. I'll discuss it with you. Really appreciate it though. Really appreciate the support. I'm trying to grow my brand, trying to grow my channel. And until next time, thank you all. See you in the next one. Bye.